thank you for joining us. Hopefully you're here because you care about technology, you're interested in APIs, obviously, which is the theme of the event, but also there's a keen eye or a keen ear on the impact of some of those technologies on this great earth that we live upon. Look, climate change has been on the world's agenda for some time now. There's a lot of things going on with weather events. I'm from New South Wales, so we've had floods, deluge level floods where, it's kind of Noah get the ark style responses to that. Bushfires not that long ago, ongoing weather events, La Nina, El Nino, whatever it happens to be. We don't really know what's coming round next. And so we know we've been consuming more resources than the planet has to offer. We're polluting it, we're warming this planet up, we're consuming everything on it. And increasingly today it's become more of a personal interest of mine because I have 2 young children. So I start to care a little bit more about the things that I buy, the things that I use, the things I throw away, and the future that I leave behind for my children. So it's been on my mind as a technologist as well as a father and a citizen of this planet. And IT is increasingly becoming a bigger part of the problem. By 2030, it's predicted that 21% of all the energy consumed in the world will be by IT. So our mandates for, to digitally transform means we're patting ourselves on the back, celebrating all the great new ways that we're delighting our customers, fueled by electricity guzzled from the things our planet can't really afford to give anymore. And still 80% of the world's electricity is still fossil-based. So it kind of begs the question posed to all of us today, how much is your digital transformation costing future generations? So what do we do? Well, this isn't really necessarily about the steps we take at home and being a good green corporate citizen. Recycling, turning off appliances when they're not in use, and choosing perhaps where we invest our money. This is about how we architect our systems, how we leverage the network to shuffle the data around that fuels all these digital outcomes, and how we get those digital jobs done, all whilst ensuring that we're doing the best by dear Mother Earth. It's been said for a very long time that change is the only constant. And this is a very familiar concept in IT. How many times have you heard the term digital transformation? Digital transformation is all about change, ongoing, relentless change, radically changing how we build applications, how we deploy applications, embrace them, and even consume them, and the delight that the audiences obtain on the back of it. In fact, it's likely that we've never seen so much change in the IT landscape as what we're currently seeing today. And the IT landscape is absolutely in a very rapidly changing state, with organisations racing to the cloud, embracing SaaS, and using APIs to create new business models, and innovating at a velocity deemed simply impossible only a few short years ago. The result of all this change in IT is that it's very evident that the future of every organisation on the planet is driven by software, and the future of software is distributed. This change continues at a breathless pace today. Every organisation rapidly innovating in this digital space. And consumers are becoming more aware of the social impact of this change. In fact, 85% of consumers have in fact shifted their purchasing power and their purchasing behaviour to prioritise sustainability in the next 5 years. And more than a third of those consumers have stated that they will actually pay more for products that are sustainable. So as expectations around sustainability climb, companies will face significant pressure in order to prove their sustainability credentials and continue to make it part of their key value proposition. So while attitudes, I think, vary across generations, countries, and industries, 85% of consumers have become greener in their purchasing in recent years, and that's actually really good news indeed. Because of all this change on the IT landscape, as a result, application design is evolving to support it. We're seeing traditional monolithic applications broken down, more decoupling, more distribution of where those application components are hosted and running and how they're being leveraged. New engineering practices emerge, designed to increase the pace of digital innovation and take advantage of all this change around us. And it's great to see that APIs and microservices are, not surprisingly, leading the charge in enabling so much of this. 90% of the respondents to a survey that we recently conducted believe that microservices-based applications are the future, and the ability to support distributed applications is critical for their ongoing business success. Likewise, 86% said that organisations are unable to ensure the availability and reliability and resiliency of the applications that connect these microservices-based applications are more likely to lose market share to competitors who can. So it's an awesome time indeed to be a developer and an innovator in this digital space, and of course, a consumer of it all, a digital citizen, as we all engage with these companies and these brands and these products and services using devices that we wear and we carry. However, bringing this back to the topic at hand, climate change, unfortunately, also seems to appear to be a constant. With everyone racing to the cloud, the pressure is now on for these cloud providers to do better in terms of sustainability and impact. The top 10 largest cloud providers accounted for 70% of all IT spending on cloud infrastructure, according to Gartner. Cloud sustainability initiatives will start to lead and begin with these cloud providers, which means some of the world's largest data center operators are very critical to helping us reduce the effects on climate from all this growth in IT. While essentially all cloud providers already have sustainability initiatives in place, their progress in meeting carbon reduction goals and strategies for achieving net zero carbon emissions does vary quite wildly. As well as racing to the cloud, we're very rapidly creating and leveraging more APIs, and that's awesome for all of us. We're here on API days. It's all about APIs. And I'm not going to claim that APIs prevent climate change. No single thing does, although switching away from fossil fuels would probably be a very good start. What I am going to claim, though, is that they have a key role to play. And we need to be making technical and architectural decisions with this in mind. Consider that Cisco estimates that the global web traffic in 2021 exceeded 2.8 zettabytes. So think about that for a minute. That equates to about 21 million MP3s, sorry, 21 trillion MP3s. So that's about 2,500, 2,600 songs for every single person on the planet. It's almost 3 times the number of stars in the observable universe. It's also 560 times the number of all the words ever spoken by human beings ever. And now consider that 83% of this traffic is through APIs. And so APIs have a very big role to play in helping us address some of these climate changes initiatives and some of the sustainability initiatives. Building better APIs isn't just good for the planet and our conscience. It's good for business too. The more we can architect to reduce energy consumption, the more we can reduce our costs and also our impact. So it's good for business as well as for the planet. So in the context of APIs, what are some of the things that we should have in mind as we're building and leveraging them? Well, starting with design and planning. APIs, well, they must be well designed in the first place, useful to the business outcome, and intentionally designed for discovery and reuse. I mean, this we know. We've heard about this for many years, especially at conferences like this. And we also should be ensuring that every API does its job efficiently. So, for example, sending 100 fields of data when most of the time consumers are only consuming perhaps 10 fields, we're wasting resources. We'd be sending 90 unused and unhelpful fields of data every single time that API is called. So perhaps we need to think about designing 2 versions of that API, a simple customer API and a detailed customer API. Maybe we should also consider more modern protocols like GraphQL or even gRPC or other means to ensure that only the relevant data is moving across the wire, consuming energy resources and being delivered into these digital outcomes. So efficiency matters from design, usage, data transmission, and then it offers the architecture and the protocols that support it. By 2025, the carbon emissions of hyperscale cloud services will be in the top three criterion in cloud purchasing decisions, according to Gartner. So where you choose to deploy your APIs and microservices can actually really make a difference. Code needs to be efficient, something fortunately already prioritized because a slow API makes for a bad experience anyway. But we need to start thinking about optimization for energy consumption as well as performance. For example, an efficient service that polls for data every 10 seconds is going to be less efficient overall than a data that just pushes data as required when it changes. And deployment targets for these APIs will also matter. The cloud vendors, of all people, have significant R&D budgets to make their energy consumption as low as possible. And these are budget sizes that no other company is prepared to invest on their own, in their own data centers. However, with the annual energy usage of Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, and Apple all together combined, more or less the same as the energy consumption of New Zealand as a whole, it's not as simple as just moving to the cloud and we're done. Just how renewable are their energy resources? The more that cloud vendors see this as a factor in our evaluation and our purchasing decisions, the more we will compel them to prioritize sustainability as well as efficiency. Also, we need to start considering technologies like API gateways and service mesh to optimize and reduce network traffic. We also should think more about how we leverage orchestration and containerized environments in order to optimize the consumption of resources. We can scale up when the traffic is there and we need to service at a higher scale, and we can wind down those services dynamically when the traffic subsides. If you think about an example with Nordstrom, when Nordstrom adopted containers and Docker and then Kubernetes to orchestrate them, their CPU utilization went from 4% to 40%, which allowed them to be more efficient on a per instance basis and obviously ultimately support their sustainability initiatives. And then finally to the lifecycle components of manage and observe. Within API gateways and within service mesh products, policies and plugins exist like rate limiting and caching and others to control how many requests a client can make in any given period and most efficiently service those. Broad observability gives control over what's running, how it's running, and insights needed to optimize and right-size our API architecture, hopefully dynamically. Are there lots of requests for an API coming from a different continent to where it's hosted? Should we consider redeploying that API local to the demand to reduce broad network consumption? Are there APIs sitting there idle and unused, and should we decommission them? Is there a performance bottleneck? Investigate the cause, and if appropriate, consider refactoring the API implementation to be more efficient and with some of these green initiatives in mind. API management is one of the necessary tools for reducing the carbon footprint of your API estate. And its sole purpose is to give you that visibility and control over those APIs and how they're consumed, to put you in a much better position to make some of these choices architecturally, implementation-wise, and where you deploy these services to with sustainability in mind. So there's areas across the full API lifecycle which, when carefully considered, can result in overall API success, which is what you want for your businesses, and benefits in terms of sustainability, and ultimately judicious and careful use of very finite planetary resources. Beyond our own APIs, there are increasingly more companies offering APIs that can help you make products and processes greener. For example, by assessing or offsetting your carbon emissions, you can embed these sorts of APIs broadly through the API economy into your workflow, into the services and products that you produce. One such example is Patch, which offers an API-first carbon removal opportunity, an API that enables businesses to programmatically calculate their emissions and immediately offset them by investing in a range of vetted projects. Shopify, as an example, is an e-commerce platform which offers carbon offset. So when you purchase a product through Shopify, you can optionally opt in to offset your carbon emissions. And they will invest that into initiatives to help sustain our planet. And you've got to imagine that Shopify is shipping a lot of packages around the globe via air, and we know air travel is a big contributor to carbon emissions, so it's quite important. They do this by embedding services from Pachama into the buying workflow. It's a carbon offsetting company that uses artificial intelligence and machine learning on satellite observations to measure where the carbon is, where it's been captured, and how it changes over time, and where the restoration work needs to be done first. It's important to note here that we need to do more than just compensate for our own emissions. But it's a better starting point than nothing. Offsetting emissions means we just counter it in one place the damage we do elsewhere, resulting in a net zero ecosystem in which we don't make things worse overall. It's not the same as reducing our emissions in the first place and actually making things better. There are other examples too. APIs we can use to enhance our own workflows, both internal and external, to make them greener. Tomorrow.io provides highly accurate spookily accurate weather forecasting data via an API to help businesses better inform their own operations. An airline, for example, could use these APIs to understand how much fuel to carry based upon upcoming weather events. Emissions API provides satellite observed emissions data to drive better, more impactful climate-focused programs, like a 3D visualizer of the carbon monoxide concentrations across the planet. And Uplight provides data to help accelerate decarbonisation programs through smart energy consumption and measurement, and bringing energy providers and energy consumers together. And they're just a few examples of the countless APIs you can find online yourself. But innovation doesn't stop there. A staggering almost $90 billion was invested in climate tech last year, which, as you can see, is almost 14 cents in every venture capital dollar. So it's a very rapidly growing domain, and investment is pouring into it to make these initiatives sustainable. And then there's the APIs that you build to power your business, hopefully in a very sustainable fashion. How you design them, where you deploy them to, and how you manage them is actually really going to matter to the planet that we live on. We have all the green building blocks ready for us to innovate on top of that. The missing ingredient is us. The idea you had a few months ago, the hackathon you're planning, the conference talk you were inspired by, hopefully. What will you create? Consumers are increasingly demanding alternatives and turning towards environmentally aware companies already. As stated earlier, 50% of consumers now rank sustainability as a top 5 value driver. It's not just an ethical decision to be more sustainable, but it's now a business one. We have an opportunity to innovate and develop the solutions. We have a growing expectation from our customers to provide sustainable products. Let's use this technical experience and creativity to do just that. So whether you're motivated by your conscience or the fact that more efficiency means higher profits and a better outcome for your business, the planet asks two things of you. Acknowledge and accept that there's a problem. Not just that global warming exists, but that IT is a large and growing part of the problem. By 2030, it's predicted 21% of all the energy consumed in the world will be by IT. Energy that is still, for the very vast majority, generated from fossil fuels. The internet accounts for 3.7% of global carbon emissions today, and that's just slightly more than aviation. And we all know we need to fly less. Why don't we think about how we build and use technologies with the same level of guilt? And then change and take action. You don't even need to stand up. The next time you're building or versioning an API, build it following green engineering principles. The next time you're breaking down a monolithic application into microservices, Minimize the microservice traffic. Remove unnecessary network hops. Bring this up in decision sessions and discussions and architecture review boards. Educate your colleagues and do more research yourselves. Sitting here behind our laptop screens, it's really easy to feel quite far removed from the impact of climate change. We happily switch between Google Drive, iCloud, various different SaaS applications, and the upteen number of applications that we use on a day-to-day basis, often without thinking about the impact they have on our planet. Thanks to privacy concerns, we have a growing awareness of how and where our data is transferred, stored, and shared. But most of us do not have the same instinctive thought process when we think about carbon emissions rather than just privacy and trust. So it's time to make this a default behaviour. It's time to accept, brainstorm and challenge each other that as technologists, perhaps there are better ways for us to build applications and connect systems than we previously considered. And what I've shared here hopefully is just a starting point. Right now, big oil has quite deservedly got a bad rap when it comes to climate change. Unless we take action now, it could be us. It could be IT that's next. As we digitise, we need to make sure that we're not the next industry causing the problem. And so with that, here's a greener future to all of us. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Brad. We have a moment to have questions. In the interim, we're going to have our next speaker come and get set up so we can be running on time. But did anyone have any questions to start us off with Brad today? Very good. I think you covered it. I had one. Okay. I found it very fascinating. I think just considering when you're talking about the loads, I imagine if we had trucks of food going 10 times as much as we actually needed and consumed at the grocery stores would be a bit of an atrocity. But of all of the capabilities of utilizing APIs for reducing digital waste, what's the soonest achievable priority?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think pressure on the cloud providers, right? A lot of us are moving so much workload and we're innovating and building new capabilities that get deployed into these cloud platforms. Hold them to account. Really measure them and have them prove their sustainability credentials is a really easy thing for them to do. And the more pressure we put on them, the more they're going to consider it as part of their business model. I think the second easiest one to do is, as I said, next time you touch an API and you version it or build some new capabilities into it, keep some of those efficiency concepts in mind. Think about how we use the network just as much as we used to think back in the days of C and C++, how much we used memory and how careful we were with how much memory we consumed when we're building applications. Let's now start to think about how much energy we use as well, when we're building those apps.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Brad, and thanks for being with us this morning.